September 19th, 1942, 27,000 feet above Berlin. The sky should have belonged to Germany. The Reich told its people the Luftwaffe ruled here, absolute, unchallenged. But on this morning, something slipped through their airspace that shattered that illusion forever. Oberlieutenant Wilhelm Jorns tightened his grip on the control stick of his Messerschmitt Bf-109G. The supercharger screamed, the DB-605 engine bled in the red, yet the aircraft ahead of him, tiny, sleek, impossibly fast, was pulling away. This was no normal enemy. It had no gun turrets, no armored belly, no heavy tail guns, just a smooth, slender frame that looked wrong for war, like something that didn't belong here. It looked weak. It looked like wood. Jorns blinked hard, adjusting his gun sight. Twin engines, long glass nose, no escort, no drag, no fear. "He's accelerating," Jorns transmitted. "Static," answered him. He pushed throttle past combat limit, engine temp climbing, fuel vanishing, airframe shuddering at max speed. The British plane kept pulling away. If you're new here and you want more real, immersive World War II stories that put you right inside the cockpit, the trenches, and behind enemy lines, hit subscribe right now. Most people will scroll past history and forget it ever happened, but not you. You're here because you want to feel it. So click subscribe and like this video before we continue. This story is just getting started. For 8 minutes, he hunted it. For 8 minutes, he lost. The humiliation was total. He had just met the de Havilland Mosquito, the aircraft Germany had mocked as a British joke, a plywood toy, a wooden coffin for naive pilots. But this wasn't a joke. It was a warning. And inside Berlin, powerful men were about to panic. Months before that encounter, Nazi intelligence had already received a report about this aircraft, and they laughed. That would be their first mistake. In early 1941, German operatives in neutral Sweden intercepted blueprints for a new British long-range aircraft. The analysis made no sense. A bomber made almost entirely from wood. No guns, no armor, no defensive crew. The Luftwaffe's engineering board dismissed it instantly. Impossible, British desperation propaganda. No bomber survives without guns. But the British engineers behind the Mosquito didn't care about survival. They weren't building another bomber. They were building something else. Something engineered to exploit a weakness in German aircraft design so brutal, so obvious, that no one saw it coming. The Mosquito was not built to fight. It was built to outrun war itself.
While RAF bombers were being torn apart over Germany, a small group of designers secretly rejected the entire doctrine of air combat. Why dogfight? Why fly in huge vulnerable formations? Why trade lives in the sky when you could simply fly faster than death? The Mosquito was born from a ruthless idea. If they can't catch you, they can't kill you. Wood made it lighter. No guns made it faster. No armor meant no drag. 2 Merlin engines transformed it into something new, a ghost that could invade sky and vanish before fighters could react. It didn't just break German engineering, it humiliated it. Berlin would feel that humiliation first. January 30th, 1943. While Hermann Goering prepared a national broadcast celebrating Hitler's 10th year in power, a flight of Mosquitoes approached Berlin at high altitude. Radar reported a small threat. Interceptors launched. Too late. The Mosquito bomber reached Berlin first. It dropped its payload, not on a military base, but directly on Goering's broadcast station. His speech to the nation cut off mid-sentence as shrapnel ripped through the studio. Goering was humiliated in front of the entire country. At 3 p.m., he tried again at a second location. A second mosquito bombed that building too. Germany never forgave that insult, and Hermann Goering never recovered from it. That was the day Germany stopped laughing at the wooden plane. That was the day fear began.
The Luftwaffe called an emergency conference. Reports came in from every air division across occupied Europe. Same story, same failure. Interception attempt unsuccessful. Target escaped. Contact lost. Aircraft climbed beyond pursuit ceiling. Enemy moved as if immune to interception. German fighter doctrine collapsed in real time. Pilots trained to attack formation bombers now found themselves chasing ghosts, fast, silent intruders that struck and disappeared. The Mosquito didn't just win battles, it broke tactics. Goering raged in a way his staff had never seen. His personal quote circulated through every briefing room on the continent. "I refused to believe the British could produce a fighter faster than ours made of wood." Denial turned to obsession. He ordered Mosquito squadrons to be destroyed at all costs. He demanded new tactics. He demanded the impossible. "Bring me the wooden plane." But no one could, because no one could catch it. How do you kill something you can't catch? You sabotage it before it launches. The Mosquito became priority target number one for German intelligence. Sabotage missions began. Supply chains were attacked. Cross-border timber shipments went missing. De Havilland factories were targeted in bombing runs. Nazi agents attempted to burn wood processing sites in Canada. Nothing worked. The Mosquito production decentralized. Built in piano factories, furniture shops, railway depots, anywhere wood was worked. It became the world's first distributed war machine. Germany couldn't bomb it out of existence because it was everywhere. And the most humiliating part? It was being built by civilians, craftsmen, carpenters, cabinet makers, while Germany spent fortunes on over-engineered monsters like the Me-210 and He-177, both catastrophic failures. The Mosquito didn't care. It kept coming.
Germany escalated. The Mosquito escalated harder. New mission types arrived. Low-altitude ocean strikes against U-boats. Surgical bombing runs on Gestapo headquarters, Pathfinder missions guiding heavy bombers, night fighter missions hunting German aircraft, and psychological raids that hit cities with zero warning. It was versatile, elegant, deadly, everything German aircraft were not. Then came Operation Jericho, the mission that turned the Mosquito from a fast bomber into a legend. France, February 18, 1944, 11 a.m. The walls of Amiens prison stood thick and cold, packed with resistance fighters the Gestapo planned to execute at dawn. Their fate was sealed, until a whisper passed through RAF intelligence, "We're getting them out." The rescue wouldn't come from the ground, it would come from the sky. A squadron of Mosquitoes flew in low under radar, skimming the countryside just feet off the ground. They moved so fast, German spotters couldn't track them. Civilians looked up and saw only blurs. Inside the prison, walls shook. Inmates hit the floor. Germans panicked. The Mosquitoes didn't target guards. They didn't target barracks. They targeted walls. They carved a hole in the prison itself. Precision bombing at less than 100 feet altitude. Impossible. Insane. Perfect. Hundreds escaped before German reinforcements arrived. It was one of the most daring rescue missions in aerial history. The Mosquito wasn't just a plane anymore. It was a message. We will go anywhere. We will strike anything. And you will never stop us. By 1944, the Mosquito had become more than a problem. It was a humiliation. Every time German command promised control of the skies, mosquitoes appeared to disprove it. Every time Göring claimed German engineering supremacy, mosquitoes tore that lie apart. The damage wasn't just military, it was psychological, it was personal. Inside the Luftwaffe collapse, German squadrons began refusing mosquito interception missions. They didn't say it out loud, but every pilot knew mosquito hunting was suicide for engines. You could push your Bf-109 or FW-190 to full power trying to catch one, but within minutes, the temperature hit red. Engines seized, fuel ran dry, turbos failed, rudders ripped apart. The official term for this in Luftwaffe reports was operational fatigue. Pilots had a different phrase, the mosquito curse. Some swore the aircraft wasn't just fast, it was alive. It moved before you did. It climbed when you chased. It dove when you fired. It vanished into cloud and reappeared behind you. German pilots weren't afraid of dying. They were afraid of being made fools of. Nothing in war is worse than being hunted by something you can't catch. Nazi pride tried to fight back and failed. Germany tried everything. Me-410 Mosquito Hunter Project, outrun it with speed, failed. Heinkel HE-219 Night Interceptor, fight it at night, failed. D-335 File, twin-engine push-pull speed demon, too late. V-1 and V-2 revenge weapons, irrelevant. Mosquitoes destroyed launch sites. Nothing worked. The Mosquito killed programs by existing. Entire divisions were forced to reorganize. German strategy had to shift from offense to defense. Speed had rewritten the laws of air combat, and Germany had no answer.
Göring's confession. In a private briefing recorded by Allied intelligence after the war, Hermann Göring admitted a truth that shattered German air doctrine. It makes me furious when I see the Mosquito. I turn green and yellow with envy. The British, who can afford aluminum better than we can, spare it. They build their planes of wood. He finally understood. The Mosquito didn't just use speed. It used humiliation as a weapon. The most dangerous version of all. The Mosquito FB-6 fighter bomber changed the war. It didn't just outrun German fighters, it hunted them. Night after night, Mosquito crews stalked German aircraft in the dark, intercepting bombers, ambushing fighters, tearing apart supply lanes. German bomber crews had a name for the Mosquito, Der Splintered Toad, the splinter of death. It struck fast, it killed clean, it evaporated into the sky. But the Mosquito wasn't finished. Hitler still controlled Europe by terror. He had allies. He had propaganda. He had secrets buried in the shadows. And the Mosquito? It was built to go into shadows.
They didn't fear enemy fighters. They didn't fear anti-aircraft guns. What every pilot feared was their own wings ripping off mid-flight. In 1943, the Air Force faced a problem so deadly it was classified. The wings were failing. Entire bombers tore apart in the sky, killing dozens at a time, not from enemy fire, but from their own aircraft coming apart under stress. Reports came in from every squadron. Pilots swore they heard wings creak and scream at high altitude. Tail gunners watched metal bend and ripple during sharp turns. Command ignored them. Engineers on the ground blamed pilots for improper aerial maneuvering, and headquarters blamed the chaos of war. Nobody listened until it was almost too late. One mission over the North Atlantic turned the suspicion into horror. 30 B-17s cut through a frozen sky, fighting brutal headwinds. In bomber number 27, the pilot heard a metallic shriek, like steel screaming inside the wing. Then came the cracking. The left wing fractured, ripping in half. The aircraft broke apart, and the crew was thrown into the sky. They never even saw an enemy. Their plane simply destroyed itself in midair. The official report blamed turbulence. Privately, the investigation revealed a chilling truth. The B-17's wing design had a hidden structural weakness. It was never built to survive the stress of real combat flying. But instead of grounding the fleet for repairs, High Command took another path. They buried the truth. Thousands of lives were now at risk. Every mission became a game of survival against physics. But everything changed because of one man. Not a general, not a commander, not a decorated ace. A field engineer, a quiet, stubborn mechanic named Elias Carter. Carter wasn't special on paper. He had no rank worth mentioning, no inventions to his name. But what he did have was a mind that refused to accept death as part of acceptable loss. After watching 3 bombers fall apart during routine takeoff in a single week, he began collecting torn metal from crash sites. He studied the fractures, traced stress lines with chalk, and compared the damage from 10 different aircraft. The pattern he found terrified him. The wings weren't failing because of damage. They were failing because of design flaws.
He submitted a report to command. They threw it out. He warned the chief air engineer. They shut him down. They had a war to fight. They didn't have time for theories. But Carter knew he was right, so he broke the rules and did something that could have sent him to prison. He began fixing bombers in secret. With no official funding, no support, and no approval, he raided the junk piles behind the hangars. He scavenged landing gear cables, spare bolts, cracked aluminum braces, everything he could find. What he built looked insane. Field crews laughed at him. He didn't care. His idea was simple but genius. Disperse wing stress before it becomes deadly. Using improvised steel braces and redistributed tension cables, he created a crude but effective reinforcement system. It redirected flight strain through multiple points, preventing catastrophic failure. The problem? If his design failed at altitude, it would rip the entire wing clean off and kill the crew instantly. He needed a test pilot, someone desperate or crazy. He found one. At dawn, a modified B-17 was rolled onto the runway. No markings, no paperwork. Carter had installed his secret reinforcement overnight. Ground crew watched in disbelief. If this experiment failed, the plane would disintegrate in front of them. The engines roared to life. The bomber lifted into the frozen morning sky. 2,000 feet, 5,000, 10,000. The test pilot threw the aircraft into a hard banking turn, the exact maneuver that had destroyed so many bombers. The wings groaned under pressure, and the metal flexed. Then something incredible happened. The strain stabilized. Carter's design held. For a moment, everyone on the ground believed they were witnessing a miracle of instinctive engineering. And then, just as hope appeared, fire erupted from the left engine. The bomber spiraled out of control, and Carter could only watch, helpless, as his illegal invention and everyone on board vanished into the clouds. What happened next would ignite a war inside the Air Force itself, a war not fought with bullets and bombs, but with pride, politics, and power. Because what Carter built didn't just save one plane, it had the power to save an entire air fleet, and that made him very dangerous. October 14th, 1943. 25,000 feet above Germany,
Staff Sergeant Michael Romano crouches in the cramped tail section of his B-17, hands gripping twin 50-caliber machine guns that weigh more than he does. Through the small plexiglass window, he watches a Focke-Wulf 190 positioning for an attack run. 6 o'clock low, the bomber's most vulnerable angle. Romano squints through his ring and bead sight, the primitive aiming system, essentially two metal posts he must align with his target, offers no compensation for speed, no calculation for deflection, no help whatsoever, as both aircraft hurtle through the sky at combined closing speeds exceeding 500 miles per hour. He fires. Tracers arc harmlessly behind the diving fighter. The FW-190's cannons flash. 20-millimeter shells tear through aluminum like tissue paper. This scene repeats itself 291 times today across the 2nd Schweinfurt raid. The 8th Air Force dispatches 291 B-17 Flying Fortresses deep into Germany without fighter escort. By nightfall, 60 bombers, more than 20% of the attacking force, will be shot down. Another 138 return so badly damaged they'll never fly again. 600 American airmen are dead. The mathematics are brutal and unsustainable. At this rate, no bomber crew will statistically survive their required 25 missions. Post-mission analysis reveals the grim truth. Tail gunners, supposedly the bomber's last line of defense against the preferred German attack angle, achieve hit rates below 8%. Fighter pilots need merely attack from the rear, endure a few seconds of inaccurate return fire, and methodically destroy America's billion-dollar strategic bombing campaign, one fortress at a time. Senior commanders gather at 8th Air Force headquarters in High Wycombe, England. The defensive armament supposed to make the B-17 a flying fortress has failed catastrophically. Without a solution, daylight precision bombing, the entire strategic doctrine faces cancellation. What these commanders don't know is that at that very moment, on a cold, hard stand at Bassingbourn Airfield, a 22-year-old tail gunner with barely a high school education is sketching a design in his logbook that violates multiple Army Air Forces regulations, a design that will be called mechanically impossible by weapons engineers, a design that will triple tail gun accuracy and save thousands of American lives. This is the story of the innovation they tried to ban, and the gunner who refused to stop.
To understand why Romano's innovation proved so revolutionary, you must first understand the impossible problem tail gunners faced in 1943. The B-17 Flying Fortress entered combat with a defensive philosophy borrowed from naval warfare, bristling with enough machine guns to create overlapping fields of fire. The bombers were theoretically protected through sheer volume of lead. Army Air Force's promotional materials called it a flying battleship. Reality proved brutally different. Staff Sergeant Michael Romano reported to Bassingbourn Airfield, England, in August 1943 as a replacement tail gunner for the 91st Bomb Group. He was a former factory worker from Pittsburgh, no college degree, no engineering background, barely 19 years old when he enlisted. The Army trained him for 6 weeks how to clear jams, estimate range, and pray his shots connected. His assigned position, the tail gunner station, was barely larger than a coffin. He had to kneel on a bicycle seat, feet braced against the aircraft structure, hands wrestling 84-pound Browning M2 machine guns through a cramped field of fire. The guns pivoted on a simple yoke mount. His aiming system consisted of a ring and bead sight, a metal circle with a post at the front, like sights on a frontier rifle.
To hit a diving fighter, Romano had to estimate the target's speed relative to his own aircraft, calculate deflection angle, where to aim ahead of the target, compensate for bullet drop over distance, execute all calculations while wearing bulky gloves in -40 degrees temperatures, fire before the German pilot's cannons with 4 times his range, and hope his shots landed before his tail position was turned into shrapnel. Expert gunners from peacetime aerial gunnery schools attempted the same shots under controlled conditions. Their hit rates barely exceeded 12%. In combat, stressed, oxygen-deprived, and under fire, actual hit rates plummeted to 6 to 8%. The Luftwaffe recognized this vulnerability immediately. German fighter tactics evolved throughout 1943. Attack from 6 o'clock level or low, accept 15 to 20 seconds of inaccurate tail gunfire, close to 200 yards, and unleash devastating 20mm cannon strikes. Luftwaffe after-action reports described B-17 tail positions as marginally dangerous, accuracy insufficient to deter attacks. August 17, 1943, First Schweinfurt raid. 60 bombers lost. October 8, 1943, Bremen raid, 30 bombers lost. October 10, 1943, Münster raid, 30 bombers lost. The 8th Air Force hemorrhaged bombers faster than factories could replace them. General Henry Hap Arnold, commanding general of the Army Air Forces, received casualty reports in Washington and questioned whether daylight bombing remained viable. Engineers proposed solutions: more guns, bigger caliber, powered turrets. Boeing's Cheyenne Modification Center began designing an improved tail turret, but development timelines stretched into 1944. Powered turret prototypes existed, but installation required removing the entire tail section, a months-long factory modification impossible on bombers already in England. Meanwhile, men died. Romano flew his first combat mission on August 19, 1943, targeting Gilsay-Ryan Airfield in the Netherlands. He fired 480 rounds at 3 attacking FW-190s. He believed he scored hits. Gun camera footage later revealed every tracer passed harmlessly behind the targets. The fighters destroyed 2 bombers in his formation. After his third mission, Romano stayed on the hardstand after landing, staring at his guns. His hands shook, not from fear, but from the physical exhaustion of manhandling 84-pound weapons through sustained fire while kneeling at altitude. That night he sketched his first design concept. The problem wasn't the gun, it wasn't even the mount. It was that tail gunners fired blind, chasing targets they couldn't properly track, aiming at points in space they couldn't accurately predict. What Romano needed was something the Army Air Forces hadn't provided, a way to see where his bullets would actually go before pulling the trigger. He needed a reflector sight. But the tail position's cramped quarters made standard reflector installation impossible, unless someone broke the rules.
November 12, 1942, Western Desert, North Africa. A sky the color of gunmetal hung over the Sahara. The wind moved like a blade, carrying dust and the smell of burned fuel across the wasteland. The war in North Africa had already devoured men, tanks, and nations, and it was about to teach one soldier a lesson he would carry for the rest of his life. The wreck of a British supply convoy lay silent in the sand. Scattered crates, twisted steel, black smoke curling into the cold desert air. The battle had ended only minutes earlier. Tracer fire still glowed in the dunes, but the Afrika Korps advanced, disciplined and relentless. A scouting platoon moved in to secure the convoy. Helmets low, rifles ready. Their boots crunched over broken glass and shell casings. Every man expected traps. Every shadow felt like a sniper.
That's when one of them saw it. A small shape, low, olive drab, parked halfway behind a shattered truck. Not British, not German. Something strange. A vehicle. A captured American vehicle. One of the soldiers called out, confused, "Was ist das?" They approached cautiously, rifles raised. It sat untouched, engine still warm. The paint was perfectly smooth, the tires thick and deep-tracked for terrain, rugged, compact, efficient. A metal plate on the dashboard read, Willis MB, U.S. Army. They called it a Jeep. The desert fell silent. The German lieutenant stepped forward, boots sinking into sand. His face was calm but curious, the kind of curiosity that comes before a storm. He looked at the mechanics in his unit. "Get our best man." Minutes later, he approached, the man who would become the witness of this story. A hardened Afrika Korps mechanic, a quiet man who had repaired everything from Panzer transmissions to half-tracks crippled under artillery fire. He valued one thing above all, German engineering superiority. To him, nothing built by Americans could match German precision. He opened the hood of the Jeep, and in that moment, everything he thought he knew about war, about engineering, about Germany's future, began to crack. Because inside the Jeep, nothing made sense. No complicated layout, no overworked metal, no delicate instruments, no need for specialized tools, no complex firing systems. Everything was simple, brutally simple. The kind of simple that only comes from genius. The wires were color-coded, every component labeled, bolts were standardized, fuel system, basic but unbreakable, air filter, field-ready, spark plugs, accessible in seconds. Everything was designed for a farm boy to fix in a trench under enemy fire. It wasn't just a vehicle. It was a revelation. And as he stared under that hood, surrounded by the emptiness of the Sarah, he realized this machine wasn't built for comfort or elegance or beauty. This machine was built to win wars, and Germany had nothing like it. He didn't say a word, but the wind carried a message across the dunes, a warning from a silent enemy. America wasn't just fighting with soldiers. America was fighting with factories. And for the Afrika Korps, that changed everything.
The morning sun rose over the wrecked supply column, turning the desert into a sheet of molten gold. The sand was littered with broken crates, torn canvas, and bullet-riddled fuel drums leaking into the ground like bleeding metal. Crows were already circling overhead. They always came after battle. Feldwebel Karl Weber wiped a line of sweat from his brow. He stood over the captured American Jeep, hands on his hips. He was a battlefield mechanic, attached to 9th Leichte Afrika Division, and he had seen hundreds of vehicles in his life, but never one like this. It looked crude, ugly even. Flat panels, box frame, simple canvas roof. No German engineer would dare make something so plain. But it had survived this ambush. Their own German vehicles hadn't. Behind him, Oberleutnant Franz Richter, their reconnaissance officer, tapped the Jeep's hood impatiently. "Can we use it?" Karl didn't answer immediately. He just stared at the Jeep. Most vehicles he encountered in Africa were stubborn bastards, delicate, over-designed, temperamental in the desert heat. But this thing, this box on wheels, felt different. It still smelled like gasoline and tobacco. It still looked alive. "We'll see,"
he finally answered. He pulled the hood latch and lifted, and then he froze. For the first time since he had been drafted into the Wehrmacht, a machine made him feel insulted. It shouldn't have been possible. The engine compartment was immaculate. Everything was labeled. Wiring was color-coded. Bolts were standard size. Parts could be removed in minutes without special tools. This wasn't German engineering. This was something else. Behind him, the other mechanics gathered around. Mein Gott, muttered Dieter, his assistant. Even the oil filter is easy to reach. Look, Carl said, pointing to the layout. No engineering arrogance. Everything is simple, practical, purpose-built. This isn't engineering, Hans scoffed. This is farm equipment. Carl shook his head. No. This is war equipment. He pulled the choke and turned the ignition. The engine started on the first try. No grinding, no sputtering, just a smooth, controlled rumble. The men stepped back. Carl revved the engine skeptically. The Go Devil engine responded instantly. Tough, simple, uncomplaining. How is that possible? Whispered Dieter. Carl didn't answer. His pride was at war with his reality. The Jeep worked. Better than anything he'd seen in North Africa. He looked around at the damaged column. One of their own Kübelwagons sat nearby, its suspension destroyed, its radiator cracked, its engine choked with sand. The German vehicle represented precision engineering, but this American Jeep represented something far more dangerous. Industrial ruthlessness. This thing wasn't built for elegance. It was built to be multiplied. This changes everything, he muttered. What? Carl didn't respond. Instead, he reached into the glove box and pulled out a maintenance manual. His blood went cold. The instructions were written so simply that any idiot could service this machine. Hans leaned over his shoulder and laughed bitterly. They wrote these for peasants. No, Carl said slowly, eyes narrowing. They wrote this to win a long war. He stood up straight, feeling something he didn't want to feel. Respect. Far off in the dunes, artillery thundered again. Their war wasn't over, not by a long shot, but something had changed. He could feel it. Back at camp, the captured Jeep became a sensation. Officers argued over who would get to use it. Mechanics from other units came to inspect it, each wearing the same stubborn frown, trying to hate it, failing to. The Afrika Korps prided itself on endurance, discipline, and elite fighting spirit. They drove their vehicles until the suspensions broke and engines died in the sand. But they had always believed German design was the best in the world. Now, staring at the Jeep, Carl knew that was a lie. During field testing, he tried to break it. He overloaded the cargo. It kept moving. He drove it over rocks. It didn't complain. He cut through sand dunes that swallowed the Kübelwagen alive. The Jeep didn't even slow down. After 2 days, Carl sat alone beside the Jeep late at night, turning a wrench slowly in his hands. He looked at the simple stamped steel body. No curves, no elegance, just brutal efficiency. He hated it. He admired it. He feared it. This machine wasn't just a vehicle. It was a warning. If America builds everything like this, we can't win this war. A cold desert wind blew across the camp. He closed his eyes. For the first time since the war began, Carl Weber felt the first seed of doubt. Night fell over the desert like a black curtain, swallowing the wreckage of tanks and burnt supply trucks in silence. The wind had died down, but the smell of diesel, cordite, and scorched metal still hung heavy in the air. The front line had moved on, but the ghosts of battle lingered. Feldwebel Karl Weber crouched beside the captured jeep inside a dim tent lit by oil lanterns. Maps and scattered tools covered the ground around him. He hadn't slept since they found it. His mechanics had gone back to their bunks, but he remained, obsessed, silent, and grim. He was tearing the machine apart, piece by piece, not to repair it, but to understand it. Normally, when he touched machinery, he felt pride, order, logic. But this Jeep, it felt wrong. It shouldn't work as well as it did. It shouldn't be this easy to strip down, rebuild, and run again. War machines were supposed to be complicated. Maintenance was supposed to take hours. Broken parts were supposed to slow armies down. But this thing, this American bastard machine, was designed to make war faster. Karl ran his hand along the transfer case and four-wheel drive lever. Even that was genius in its simplicity. German Kübelwagons had decent engineering, but no four-wheel drive. They relied on clever differential tricks. This Jeep just brute-forced physics with all four wheels. Crude, savage, effective. He turned, hearing footsteps approach. Oberleutnant Franz Richter entered the tent. "You're still working?" Richter asked. Karl didn't answer. He just kept his eyes on the Jeep's exposed engine. Richter sighed. "You look like you want to strangle it." Karl finally spoke. "It shouldn't exist." Richter frowned. "Meaning?" "It's not engineered like a German vehicle," Karl said. "There was no elegance here. Everything is cheap, rough, mass-produced." "And that bothers you?" Karl looked up, face lit by lantern glow. "It terrifies me." Richter crossed his arms. "The men love it. They're saying if Rommel had 1,000 of these, he'd already be in Cairo." Karl laughed darkly. "Try 10,000, and he might make it to Jerusalem on the way." Richter leaned closer. "You're saying this Jeep is better than our Kübelwagen?" Karl didn't answer. He didn't have to. His silence was enough. Richter exhaled slowly. "Then write me a report." "Oh, there will be a report. But nobody will like it. Make it anyway." Richter turned to leave, but paused in the doorway. "And Karl?" "What?" Richter's face hardened. "Don't let the men see you afraid." Captured truth. The next morning, Karl gathered his mechanics around a table made from ammunition crates. He unrolled a sheet of canvas and placed two objects on it: a Kübelwagen drive shaft and a Jeep drive shaft.
"Study them," he said. Hans lifted the German part. Precision machined, perfectly balanced, light. Beautiful engineering. Then he picked up the American drive shaft. It was thicker, rougher, ugly, like it had been hammered together by someone who didn't give a damn how it looked. Dieter laughed. "This looks like blacksmith work." Karl pointed. "Which one do you think survives a landmine blast?" The laughter stopped. He slammed the Jeep part on the table. "This isn't beauty. This is war. This thing isn't made for parades. It's made to be built fast, driven hard, and survive hell." He pulled open a crate and dumped more parts on the table. Jeep axles, air filters, fuel pumps. "All standardized," Karl said. "Interchangeable across every Jeep they make. Do you understand what that means?" Hans frowned. "Factories can replace parts fast?" Karl shook his head. "No, it means they can build an army faster than we can destroy it." Silence. Nobody laughed now. The report Berlin won't want. By evening, Karl sat hunched over a crate with a fountain pen, writing by lantern light. Technical summary, U.S. Willys MB, field assessment. Conclusion,
The American Jeep is not a vehicle, it is a strategy. He wrote about cold start performance, excellent. Engine access for field maintenance, exceptional. Parts interchangeability, revolutionary. Shock absorption over rough terrain, superior. Fuel compatibility, runs on almost anything. Serviceability by anyone with basic tools, dangerous advantage. He hesitated before writing the final line. His pride didn't want him to write it, but his duty forced him to. Recommendation: immediate study and adoption of similar principles, or within 2 years, we will be overwhelmed by American production capacity. He signed it, Feldwebel Karl Weber, Afrika Korps, Vehicle Maintenance Command. He hated what he wrote, because every word was true. Desert Trial. 2 nights later, Rommel's corps moved under the cover of darkness, withdrawing deeper into Tunisia under constant British pressure. The Jeep came with them. During a night convoy, they reached a dune slope that stopped the German column cold. Trucks bogged down, half-tracks struggled. The Kuba-wagons died in the sand one by one. Richter looked back at Karl. Test it. Karl climbed into the driver's seat. The engine came alive instantly. He threw it into 4-wheel drive and drove straight up the dune. Effortlessly. The entire column watched. Nobody spoke. Nobody needed to. The truth was now obvious. Germany's engineering pride had just been outmatched by American practicality, and Karl knew this was only the beginning.
Night convoys in the desert were a special kind of hell. Engines overheated, transmissions locked, and sand clogged every machine built by men who had never seen real war. The Afrika Korps had learned a long time ago, the desert doesn't kill you with bullets first. It kills your machinery, it kills your hope, then it kills you. But one machine refused to die. The Jeep. A machine that keeps moving. Karl sat behind the wheel, knuckles white as he gripped it. The desert wind slapped his face, gritty sand stinging his skin. The Jeep growled beneath him, steady, obedient, unstoppable. He crested the dune and circled back down when something caught his eye, half buried in shadow near a dry wadi trench. A Ford GPA amphibious Jeep, another American design, half sunk, abandoned. More of them were here, more than one. The Americans had left equipment behind like trash, not because they were careless, because they had so much of it. They didn't need to go back for it. Karl stared at the machines for a long time. Germany could barely replace trucks lost in battle. America left them behind like empty ration tins. Night fire. Tracer rounds cut suddenly through the darkness, thin red streaks whipping past like angry meteors. Artillery thundered a moment later, mortars exploding across the column. Ambush! Take cover! Chaos erupted. Men scrambled, falling into the sand face first. A shell annihilated a truck nearby, sending a flaming tire spinning into the sky like a drunk comet. Screams tore through the smoke. Richter slid down behind Caro. British artillery! Move, move! We can't! The Hof tracks are stuck! Leave them! Caro looked at him in disbelief. Abandon armored vehicles? Impossible. Richter pointed forward. Get the Jeep through and flank them. Find their forward observers. Karl nodded once. Mission clear. He hit the accelerator. The Jeep surged forward like a beast hungry for the hunt. They tore across the sand while artillery shells bloomed behind them. Marek manned the MG-34 on the back seat, teeth clenched against the recoil. Bullets zipped past, kicking up dirt. Karl heard metal rip and prayed it wasn't the engine block. But the Jeep just kept going. How was this thing still running? Marek yelled over the gunfire. Because the Americans built it to survive idiots, Karl shouted back. They dipped into a ravine, bouncing so hard the suspension growled but held. The Jeep didn't complain.
It wanted more, like a wolf scenting blood. They spotted the British artillery team, 5 men operating 2 25-pounder guns. No time for finesse. Carl floored the pedal and the Jeep lunged across the sand ridge like a charging hyena. Marek fired first.
Carl received his own version of the report. He read it in silence, then folded it carefully. He finally understood why his army could win battles, but lose the war. His chief of staff asked, "What should we do?" Rommel replied, "Continue fighting." "But how do we win?" the officer asked. Rommel looked out across the endless sand. "We don't." That night, a lone crate arrived in Carl's workshop, stamped with black requisition symbols. He opened it expecting Kubelwagen parts. Inside, American Jeep parts. Oil filters, bolts, spark plugs, suspension components. He held a metal crate label in disbelief. It was marked Priority, Field Operational, Do Not Delay. Sent from German High Command. It was happening. Germany had not only accepted the Jeep, Germany was now supplying Jeep parts to its own army. A foreign machine, now part of the Reich's war effort. This was beyond defeat. This was surrender. Carl wrote in his notebook, "We used to mock this vehicle. Now it keeps us alive. Truth always wins in the end, but sometimes it arrives too late to save you."
Pride doesn't die in a single moment. It erodes slowly under pressure, defeat, and necessity. And in 1943, in the deserts of North Africa, German military pride finally collapsed. The proof? Officers, men who once laughed at the Jeep, were now begging for one. The order that changed everything. A sandstorm raged when a convoy from the 10th Panzer Division rolled into Carl's desert workshop, half the vehicles broken, radiators boiling dry, wheels locked with sand-clogged brakes. Out stepped Hauptmann Franz Bayer, a hard-faced officer who had once told Carl to keep American trash off the battlefield. Now he looked different, older, exhausted, defeated. He said, "Unteroffizier Weber," not shouting, but requesting, which was rare for an officer. "I need vehicles that can move in deep sand. We're transferring artillery positions overnight." Carl pointed at the broken Kubelwagens. "They won't make it," he said. Bayer didn't argue. He just asked, "Do you have any Jeeps?" There it was. No more denial, no arrogance, just desperation. Carl nodded. 3 operational, 2 more if we swap axles tonight. Bayer took a long breath. "We'll take all 5. Carl frowned. Regulations forbid frontline Jeep deployment without division authorization. Bayer looked him dead in the eyes. Regulations are for men who aren't being bombed to death. The Jeep convoy. The next morning, Carl drove one of the Jeeps himself across the open dunes with Bayer's forward artillery section. The 5 Jeeps weaved through sand hills like wolves on the hunt, fluid, fast, unstoppable. No wheels bogged down, no engines overheated, no men had to get out and push. Behind them, 2 Kubelwagens tried to follow and immediately sank. Within minutes, they were nothing but distant specks, abandoned in the desert like metal tombstones. Death from above.